Well, less than a week till November 3rd, and things are ratcheting up all over the country. There are lines all over the place, 3 hours long in some polling areas all across the United States. Record number of people coming out before the actual election for early voting, both ballots as well as in person. A lot of things are happening. The candidates are crisscrossing the states. Vice President candidates, of course, Vice President Pence, Kamala Harris, and of course, Barack Obama with impassioned pleas at the latest in Orlando, Florida. My goodness, many would say that he was really on fire. I would agree with that. But we've got a lot to talk about in terms of the polls and where we are. So we're going to bring in, of course, Eric Ham, our political analyst and best-selling author. And Eric is joining us right now. Eric, good to see you.
Good to be here, man.
Yeah, I got to tell you, there was so much fervor. People just a few days ago were saying, the Democrats basically have this locked in. I'm listening to some of the morning shows now, and they're saying, well, I don't know. Things are getting tight. I don't believe the polls. People are getting cold feet. Where are we now with the polls?
That's interesting. I don't know where people are getting cold feet, where the polls are getting tight, because Michigan and Pennsylvania, we're actually seeing the leads that Joe Biden has had now for months actually extend. Joe Biden is leading in both of those states by an average of at least 8 points. There's a new poll out today, an ABC Washington Post poll out today, that shows Biden with a 17-point lead in Wisconsin. Now, many don't believe that he's leading by that much. That could be an outlier, but still, what it shows is Joe Biden is still very much in control in those Great Lakes Midwest states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But here's where it gets interesting. For those who believe that this race is tightening, there are many pollsters who actually believe that Joe Biden has a better chance of winning Texas than he does of winning one of Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. So let that sink in. A state that no Democrat has won in 40 years, they now believe Joe Biden has a better chance of winning it than one of these Great Lakes states. And of course, we know Texas has 38 electoral college votes. So clearly, if Joe Biden wins that, that's the ball game. In addition to those states, we do know that Joe Biden still has a slight lead in Arizona as well as North Carolina, and the polls are tight. In fact, tied in the state of Georgia and, of course, Florida. So right now, Joe Biden has several different paths to get to 270. In fact, based on where the polls are right now today, if the race ended today, Joe Biden would finish with more than 279 electoral college votes, making him the next president of the United States.
Okay, so that seems to be good news for those who are voting for Biden. But the issue is now strategy. There are some folks who are saying, you listen to some of these pundits on the morning shows are saying that, it's really a bad case strategy for Biden not to remain, say, in the battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan. He's going down, of course, I think it was Georgia yesterday. Of course, Kamala Harris is going to Texas. Some pundits suggest that playing, I'm doing a football analogy, a prevent defense is the best way to go. But Senator Claire McCaskill, I heard her earlier saying, no, he really needs to go out there. His strategy is right on point, right on time. He needs to go out there to places where perhaps he thought he might not be able to win, but could garner more votes. What's your take on this?
Look, there's nothing in the polling data that suggests that Joe Biden is losing. There's nothing in the polls that are trending away from Joe Biden. Right now, the polls and the trends are all moving in Joe Biden's favor. And so basically right now, what we're seeing, Julian, is basically akin to what we saw in 2008, where in the final days of that race, it just looked as though the race was cresting for Barack Obama. That's what we're seeing now. But I understand people are concerned because of what happened in 2016. But right now, all of the data shows that Joe Biden is winning and is winning by a lot. And not only is he winning in many of these states, but Joe Biden has so much money now, at his disposal. It's like he's got to do something with it. Why not take it and try to run up the score to try to change the race? Because also, if Joe Biden wins, Joe Biden's got to think about also how he governs. And how you govern is with a majority. And so if he can bring over that finish line, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, Mark Kelly in Arizona, if he can eke out, Cal Cunningham, who's running against Tom Tillis in North Carolina, and take that Senate seat, if he can shore up Gary Peters in Michigan, that gives him a majority in the Senate, which means now he has a greater opportunity to get his agenda through. So this is actually the smart move, because not only, and then on top of that, he has been to Pennsylvania more than any place, including more than Donald Trump has. So he has put in the work on all of these places. Now he can just run on offense, make the Trump campaign sweat, because look, just last night, they pulled out millions of dollars in ads in Ohio. So they clearly just don't have the money to spend at this point to compete. And so Joe Biden needs to he needs to blanket these spaces. And when you have people like Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, who have an overwhelming high approval rating, use this and basically flood the zone and own this electoral map.
Right. So you got all this money flooding in quietly. Again, Michael Bloomberg, I think, put another $100 million into this race to help Biden out. And Lindsey Graham seems to be he's really scraping for his political life. Fox News cut him off the other day. He was on Laura show, and he's up there, pleading for money at the beginning and the end, and they cut it off before that. This would be a really interesting thing, Eric Ham. If Lindsey Graham loses that race in South Carolina, he has a possibly good chance of not getting his seat back.
That race is tied right now. Jamie Harrison has raised an enormous amount of money, but again, South Carolina is the state where I just don't know if it's ready to turn force. But I think what we're seeing here is, Democrats have put up a number of good candidates, particularly in states that they simply just weren't supposed to be competitive. Many early on, never expected Jamie Harrison to mount much of a race against Lindsey Graham. But it's a tight race right now, and it is a race, and it's a race that when you have that amount of money to spend, it gives you a lot of different paths, and it gives you a lot of freedom in terms of how you go after your opponent and how you run your race. But with that said, I still think it's an uphill climb for Jamie Harrison in South Carolina. But I mean, in addition to South Carolina, I think another race that I'm watching very closely is that Senate race in Mississippi, where you've got Mike Espy, the former agricultural secretary for Bill Clinton, African American, who's running against Cindy Hyde Pierce. And look, she is the only Senate candidate who refused to debate her opponent this election cycle. She is sitting, and it was smart for her to do that. She's sitting on about a 2 to 3 point lead in that state. And so we know she has said some very racist things. She said some very divisive things. And so she's attempting to not give an opening to her opponent. But even in that race, in deep red Mississippi, Mike Espy in the last quarter significantly outraised her. He's got more money on hand, which again, these are tight races where you just should not see Democrats competing, doing well, and perhaps on the verge of winning. So Republicans have got to be nervous, not just about the top of the ticket, but also what we see down ballot, because they are defending a number of seats. And look, in going back to Texas, when you've got John Cornyn, who needs a $500,000 lifeline from the Republican Senate committee to hold on to his seat, Republicans have got to be concerned about how this thing can go.
All right. So anyway, looks like the Republicans are out of the defensive. I think a lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief based upon also the record number of people that are coming out early. But let's start getting away from the polls into the meat of this thing now. We've got less than a week. Okay, we've got November 3rd coming in. There is some talk right now that the Republicans may have largely not voted early. It could be close. You and I talked about a strategy. Remember in the old days, in the 60s and the 70s, a Southern strategy. Now we have a Trump strategy. Trump saying, oh, look, on election day, if you just count the people that have voted that day, and there seems to be a Republican majority, he will claim victory until all of these ballots are counted. And this thing could possibly go to the courts. We also have another situation here, the concern of militias, people with long guns coming out, intimidating voters, voter suppression. Where are we with this? what strategy of this strategy that Trump may have, how could that possibly work, especially after other ballots are counted?
You know, in 2016, it was more. I think it was about 135 million Americans voted in 2016 in the presidential
Mhm.
election.
Right.
Already this election, we have seen more than 71 million people vote, and
Mm.
we're still a week away, and you still have new states coming on where people are allowed to vote early. So
Mhm.
it's not out of the realm that we can see, you know, more than 80 million Americans vote before November 3rd, which means, you know, we're going to see a very large number of people clearly who will vote in this election cycle. Now, with that, we have seen an enormous amount of challenges. There was a recent decision by the Supreme Court that basically says if votes are not in by November 3rd in Wisconsin, those votes will not be counted.
Right.
And I saw on CNN last night, someone made a very good point. You know, when you owe the IRS money, or you have to get your taxes done by April 15th, as long as your taxes are postmarked by April 15th, you are good. But
Right.
yet, when it comes to voting, even if your vote is postmarked by November 3rd, it will not count. So
That
we see here, you know, that clearly the voter suppression, the challenges that we are now seeing that people have to vote is real, and that's deeply problematic. In Michigan, a judge just overturned a ban that will not allow people to bring guns to polling places. So
right.
now you can open carry in polling sites in the state of Michigan. We're seeing in Kentucky a number of militia groups beginning and continuing to form in that state. So clearly, on election day, we are going to see an enormous amount of people, I think, on both sides of the aisle, coming out to do poll watching. And again, what this speaks to, Julian, is the U.S. American democracy is on, I think, on creaky legs right now, because what we are going to be seeing take place on November 3rd could, I think, mirror what we see take place in third world countries or autocratic regimes across the world. And I think that's something that will be one of the biggest takeaways from this election.
All right. So this gets to the meat of this show. We've gone through the latest polls. We've gone through voter suppression, what might happen, how long this election could be contested by this president. So here's the deal, Eric. Um, I have, and people know this, I've advised both parties. I've advised Republicans. I've advised the Democrats. I have friends on both sides. I think that there are good points in each party. All right. You're talking about more government, more taxes, less government, less taxes, on a peripheral view of this whole thing. And each may have its merits. But I've never seen anything quite like this particular president or this election. So here's what I want you to break down for me, and I want you to break down to our audience. The majority of people in this country seem to be perhaps fair-minded. They want a democracy. But there's a sizable percentage of people in this country, anywhere from the mid-30s to 40% for this President Trump, that despite the evidence, and this is not being partisan, despite birther conspiracy theories, despite not denouncing white supremacy, despite the number of deaths we've had in this country from COVID, calling it a hoax, we can go down the list of things that he has said, things that are on record, talking about our veterans, even facts corroborated by Fox News. One of their hosts, Jennifer Griffin, saying to the fact that veterans are suckers and losers. Despite all of this, and I'm taking away now the people who are looking at their 401ks in the stock market. That's not the majority of people here. despite not having a health care plan in place after 10 years. He's been in office for 4. Every now and then it'll come up. It's 2 weeks away. It's 2 weeks away. People are hearing this, but yet and still they hang their hat on this guy, and I don't understand why. Look, you could have a Democrat saying the same thing, and I wouldn't vote for him. But you got these folks. It's like they're hypnotized. It doesn't matter. What does that say about us as a country where you can have that sizable percentage of people who will hang their hat on a guy who's a demagogue, who's an autocrat, and who is a liar? What does that say about us as a country, Eric Ham?
I think what that says, Julian, is that even with the outcome of this election, there are still some deep structural problems that confront American infrastructure. And what that means is you have a president where basically 40% of the nation co-signs some of the very caustic, some of the very divisive, and some of the very hateful things perpetrated by this president. And that's not going to go away simply because you may get a new president and new leadership in Congress. Those are still issues within the country. Those are issues that will still roil the nation. I don't know how we get past that. I don't know how we fix that. What I do know is that much of what we see emanating from this president is systemic, and it's historic, and it has always been with us. And I think one of the things about America is America has always been an ideal, something that the nation has aspired to be better, but yet there's still something that continues to bring us to our lowest depths. And how we get past that, I don't know. One of the things that people really enjoyed or were hopeful about an Obama administration was his soaring rhetoric. He was the embodiment of what this country could be, getting past its racial divisions and its racial history and all of the hate that came with that. But what we see now is, we have been drugged back to much of that systemic injustice, that systemic hate. And now the country is trying to figure out, where do we go from here? In fact, even if we are a nation of ideas, a nation that can reach its heights. And I think that's going to be a fight that, we're going to continue to have, but it's going to take leadership to try to help move that battle forward. We saw Abraham Lincoln do it when he certainly brought a nation together. We saw Franklin Delano Roosevelt do it when he helped not only heal a nation, but heal a broken world. And now, we have to have leadership that can guide us out of these difficult and dark times.
All right, I'm going to break this down to what we used to call down in the ghetto, the urban vernacular, the real nitty gritty before we close out here. And we talked about this the other day. I'm going to go back to when Trump first announced his candidacy for president, and he came down those golden escalators at Trump Tower, and he said some things that were very profound and provocative. And when he talked about the immigrants coming to this country, he said, well, Mexico hasn't sent its best. It sent its rapists, its murderers, right? Well, we probably just go back in history, okay? When Europeans were fleeing religious persecution and other things, well, they didn't send their best. All the folks over there, the aristocrats in France and England, they were there. They didn't send their best, okay? And we look at what's happened in this country. I love this country, Eric. I mean, there's no other stop for me. I don't know nothing about Africa. I mean, all my roots are here. And my folks fought for this country, even when this country didn't love them. But this country has been steeped in blood and violence. Slavery, as you said yourself, the most brutal form that ever existed on the face of this earth. This is what we are. The millions of people that died on the Middle Passage, all the Indians that were killed, raped, and murdered here. This is who we are. And if we can't get past this and embrace it for change, the systemic racism, which is the Achilles heel of this country, will always be here. We're not willing to embrace it. We didn't send our best. These folks come and give me your tithe, you're poor, and all this, and all the stuff that happened over here with all the mafias and Murder Incorporated and all these other gangs and drugs, the 5-point sections of New York City, and all the nonsense, the corruption. And then they talk about the Bloods and the Crips. They're like babies, MS-13, compared to what this country was birthed on. I hope that we can get past this. I don't know if we can get past this in our lifetime. But I'm concerned, Eric, that 30 to 40% of the people can think can believe this nonsense. I think that Biden will win. I think ultimately that righteousness will win out here. But again, at what cost? And how many minds will be changing, Eric? I don't know. I don't know. I'm glad that you're here because you can make some sense out of this historical perspective. But there's a veil over a lot of people's eyes in this country, Eric. And I don't know what it's going to take to shake it. I mean, I didn't want to go off my soapbox, but that's just how I feel about this.
No, yeah, you're right. This fight is much deeper than an election, and it's going to take more than an election to heal this nation and to move hearts and minds.
Yeah,
so I agree with you.
It is. Listen, next week is going to be interesting. It's going to be a doozy. A lot's going to be going on after November 3rd. So, by the way, did you vote yet? Did you vote early?
I still have not voted.
Yeah, no, neither have I. In fact, Barbara and I, we're going to go today and cast our vote and see what happens. But there will be a lot to talk about. And I'm just hoping and praying that this nightmare will not go on too much longer after November 3rd. Let's see how much of a fight that Donald Trump will put up. But more importantly, let's just see how many people come out. And I'm just believing, as they say in the old book, the Old Testament prophet Elijah, he was praying to God that his servant could see what's happening. So God, open his eyes so he can see that there's more of us, a lot more of us than there are of them. We'll just have to wait and see.
Amen.
All right. Listen, man, I'll see you next week. And for all of us who are watching today, there will be no extra monologue. I think I've said all I needed to say. If you haven't voted, get out there and vote like you've never voted before. And Eric and I will be talking next week, post-mortem after the election, to see exactly where we are and the road forward. Everybody have a great week.